I know many of you remember Jane Borg, and her grandchildren taught her how to text, and so I just got a message from her. So she'd like to share this with you. She said, "Happy 4th of July to all of you. I'm eagerly awaiting photos of Judge Bacchius and wondering if he'll admit to the assembled picnic crowd how mercilessly he called in his mortgages and how he squeezed farmers so that he could get money for the Paro Valley National Bank." And she said, "My authority is Walter Dutro, who wouldn't say that on tape." So I wanted to share that with you, and the fact that we have someone in Seaside, Oregon, sending us her love and affection. All right, now, I have been asked to go to the spirit world and challenge myself and channel the Honorable Judge Bacchius. When I was putting the hat on, I started to hum Frosty the Snowman. And I figured I had the wrong channel, so then I changed the hat a little bit and I started to get the message. By the way, there's a lady getting a little excited right now, the producer of this outfit. I want to give sincere thanks to Gail Ivanovich, who worked so very hard, along with Claudia Mays, who did all the staging and moved a lot of the material around so we could get together. But give me a moment. I'm the Honorable Godfrey Bacchius. My dad was called Gottfried. We came from a German family, and when we got to America in the early 1700s in the colonies, we ended up trying to Americanize ourselves, and a lot of you are aware of what that's about. So we changed our first name. We went to Godfried, and then of course, because I was the little one, they called me Godfrey. You know, Godfrey, did you wash your hands? Godfrey, did you take the chamber pot out? Godfrey, you know. Anyway, my family was involved in mercantile on the East Coast. We were in New Jersey as well as in Philadelphia, and I was schooled at home. And when I reached the age of majority, I went to the Philadelphia Institute of Technology, and they found out I had a skill with mathematics and science. And so I met a man by the name of Dr. Kennedy. Dr. Kennedy and I decided to start a business on the East Coast with photographic equipment, because I was fascinated, as he was, with Louis Daguerre, who had developed the process of photography. But as luck would have it, we were pretty early in our business, and we went out of business really quick. Dr. Kennedy went on to develop the Pennsylvania Polytechnic School, and I went on back to selling groceries in my father's and family's store. I married at the age of 26 Harriet Rambo of Camden, New Jersey, and we started our family. Most people would have been happy to have settled, and we had a good business, and we had our family started, but I was still restless. The East Coast at that time had a lot of people coming from Europe, and they all wanted a new beginning, a new start, and they felt that if they worked hard, they would be able to earn money and earn their fortune here in this country. So in the process, Harriet and I were outfitting these folks who would come to our stores, and they were wagon masters, and they were taking people across the continental United States to the West Coast and to other territories, of course. And they were ending up telling us about the Indians and how harrowing the trip was. And so Harriet and I did not want to put our children in harm's way. We were city folk, you know. We weren't equipped for that journey. The other possibility, if we would have gone around the Cape of Good Horn by ship, we heard of all the disasters of the boats not making it around that trip. So a third opportunity came to us, and that was leaving Boston by boat and going down to the Isthmus of Panama. There at Chagres, we were going to have the opportunity to go overland 150 miles to the city of Panama and take a boat and come back up to San Francisco that way. Well, we started our journey, and when we got to Chagres, we discovered that there was an epidemic of cholera, and we ended up losing our beloved daughter, Charlotte. Dear Charlotte. Everything we owned had to be put on the backs of natives and taken over this sweltering landscape with mosquitoes, bad water. And can you imagine a poor human being being asked to carry Carlos, about 150 pounds of cement, and wondering what about these strange white people wanting to carry this through the jungles of Panama. But at any rate, they did. And when we arrived in Panama City, we discovered that our boat had been designated a plague boat. Unfortunately, we had to spend several weeks waiting for everyone to either die or get well. It was no Carnival Lines neurovirus. When we got to San Francisco, we wandered south to this bucolic valley. It had moderate temperatures. The land was generous to farming and ranching, and we easily made it our home. Harriet and I built this house in 1870 with the help of Alex Chalmers, the local contractor, and we moved on. I went into cutting meat and selling it to ships that were leaving the West Coast, a job I didn't like very well. So I got off into banking, and I got off into politics. One of the things I discovered that was a lot of fun was that our acreage here went over 80 acres. And the 80 acres started over at Blackburn, went to the river, and at the end of Bacchus Street to the river. And some of the things we grew were not apple trees. We grew things like asparagus, but most importantly, we were growing rhubarb. And we figured out that you could cut rhubarb, dry it, and sell it to the sailors so that they could avoid scurvy. So instead of fresh fruit, now they could use the rhubarb. And the house ladies, or actually the garden ladies, from time to time complain because somewhere where the blacktop doesn't quite evenly meet the brick, you'll see volunteer rhubarb still 120 years later starting to stick its head up. In short, I was a magistrate for Santa Cruz County. That's why they call me Honorable, or Your Honor, and I hear a lot of snickering. When Watsonville incorporated in 1860, I was the first chairman of the board and trustee for Watsonville. And then in 1871, and this is where I'm going to hear the hoots, I was elected to the California State Assembly. Mine was a life that spanned a significant and colorful part of our nation's history. From my birth in 1818 to my death in 1905, my 87 years of life saw a lot of change politically in this country. I saw 20 presidents of the United States. I saw the 5th president, James Monroe, the most notable, Abraham Lincoln, and then finally the 25th president was Teddy Roosevelt. With my beloved family here in Watsonville, right here at 320 East Beach Street, together we witnessed the American dream, which spanned the abundance of natural resources, the results of the colonial war, the Civil War, and the emancipation from slavery. But sad to say, with all of that, I never had inside plumbing. You're sitting where the plumbing was. It could truly be said that my generation was the risk-taking generation. I realize now people struggle for names for generations, like the X generation, the baby boomers, what have you. But ours was the risk-taking generation. By the way, when I was being called and summoned today, I normally sit around the attic. When people come to visit, I like to run up behind them and blow cold air and kind of creep them out. I saw somebody up there with me. Gail was there with her broom trying to get the spirits out of the attic, and I saw Mabel Rowe Curtis right behind me coming down the stairs. Oh, here she comes.
My goodness, look at all you historical people here. For those of you under 100 years old, you probably don't know who I am. For those of you over 100, I'm Mabel Rowe Curtis. I was born here in Watsonville in 1885. I was destined to live here for 94 years. And what a wonderful place to live. Now, when I knew all of you were here, I wanted to make sure that I knew all of, I wanted to share such important things with you. So I have a list in my purse. I want to make sure that you hear all the good things that I have done in the Paro Valley. And they've been phenomenal. My family first came here, they headed to the gold fields, and they were some of the original 49ers. But, like what happened for many of the original 49ers, they didn't find any gold. So they came to the Paro Valley, where they thought they would apply some of their skills at farming. So they bought property, my grandparents bought property on San Juan Road. Well, years passed. More and more Rowe family members grew up, built houses along San Juan Road, and that's where I was born, in a home on San Juan Road. You could look all the way down the road, and there were Rowe family members every place you looked. Now, interestingly enough, in the early 1900s, they planted lettuce there, some of the first lettuce that was grown here in the Paro Valley. Now, I have heard a rumor, and it must just be a rumor, that they're thinking of planting strawberries on that land. I don't get it. I don't think strawberries will grow there. Let's see. What happened next to in my life? Okay. This was really important, and it's so sad too, because in 1962, my grandparents' house had to be torn down. It had fallen into disrepair, and it was very sad to lose their wonderful home. But my grandmother had lived there until she was 97 years old. My family had built a home down the road, and Cynthia Mathieson, are you here? Oh, I don't think Cynthia's here. Lorraine, I guess Lorraine had to leave. Her daughter, Cynthia, lives in my childhood home, and she loves that home like Mama and Papa and I did. And thank you to Cynthia for taking my lovely home and loving it as I did. In 1910, I married Clifford Rowe, and we were married until 1940 when he passed away. So as you can see, I've been a widow for a very long time. But as a young widow, with half my life ahead of me, I was looking for projects and things to do. I'd always been very project-oriented. So I proposed to the Watsonville Women's Club, of which I was a member. I proposed to them that we have a history gathering committee. They thought it was a good idea. So that's what we did. We formed the history gathering committee for the Women's Club. Well, guess what that turned out to be? That turned out to be the Paro Valley Historical Association. And I was the first chairperson. We called them chairman in those days. I was the first chairman of the Old Timers Picnic, of which you are here today. 75 years later, the Paro Valley Historical Association sees that our old timers and some young timers have a wonderful 4th of July picnic. Let's see, what else do I want you to know? Oh, this is really important. Another group that really needed some attention was the cemeteries. This is the place where your history really comes about. You can find so much of your history in your cemeteries. But unless there's some kind of a framework to keep them, to keep for the upkeep, they fall into disrepair, just like my grandparents' home did. Well, I was one of the early founders of the Paw Valley Cemetery District, which is still in existence today and is responsible for the upkeep of our local cemeteries. And of that, I am really very, very proud. Now, since I've always been interested in history, and I had always been very, very active, some people in Watsonville thought I was very bossy. You can see my picture over there. I was involved in a lot of things. And they thought I see Lisa Martin. Your grandmother, Doris, she thought I was extremely bossy. But she wasn't alone. But let me tell you, I would like to read you something. That opinion was not shared by the Register Pyrrhonian that stated that I, quote, single-handedly kept Paw Valley History Association going, unquote. So there. All through the devastating years of World War II, we kept our history alive. And our mission was to continue doing that, and here 75 years later, here we are still celebrating it. I served many years. Oh, I'm not done. Excuse me, I'm not done. I served many years as president of the Historical Association. And then, in 1964, Mrs. Helen Vogt Tucker donated her home just down the street across from Watsonville High School to the association for a museum. Guess what? I was hired as a live-in curator. And so I got to live at the museum in the little house in the back and spend my days in the museum and my nights in my little house. For 10 years, I was able to do that. Imagine. Wait a minute. Maybe that would make a good movie. Could we call it, what about Night at the Museum? I like that. Let's think about that. But anyway, I do want to thank you so much for having me here today. It's been such a pleasure. But, and I hope that I get to see some more of my friends here today. But remember, this place is the place where history lives. And, oh, is that the doorbell? Just a minute. Who is it? Oh, no, it's my good friend, Bernice Porter, and my colleague at PVHA, BC. Oh, darling, wow, so nice to see you.
That darling Mabel. Good afternoon. I've been invited here today to tell you a little about how I happened to come to the Paw Valley, the beautiful Paw Valley, and how I became involved with the Paw Valley Historical Association. I'm going to go way back. I was born in 1902 in Berkeley, California, and one of my very first memories is something that was really a big part of history. In 1906, my sisters and I were awakened by things falling off the shelves and books and so on. It was the 1906 earthquake. And later on, when we looked across the bay, we saw our beautiful city of San Francisco burning. It was a very, very hard time for many, many people. As I grew up, I went to school right there in Berkeley, 2 blocks away, and my sisters and I would walk to school. We went to Little McKinley, and then as we grew older, we crossed the street and went to Big McKinley. I'm going to go kind of fast forward to when I was in high school. We went to the University High School, and it was connected with some fans out there, And it was connected to the University of California, Cal. Now, one of my things I loved to do once I got into high school was play field hockey. I was always an outdoor girl, and this really suited me. And one time when I was playing, some of the girls were yelling at me, "Bare knees, bare knees." You see what had happened? I had rolled my long stockings down below my knees, which really wasn't done in those days, so they really kidded me about it. After the University High School, I went on to Cal Berkeley, and a lot of my high school friends accompanied me. I'm just going to go back a little bit. When we were in high school, we formed a very firm group that kind of stuck together throughout the 4 years, and Tom Porter was one of the people in that group. We just had wonderful times dancing and going to football games and parties, and so that really kind of continued on because many of my friends from the high school went on to Berkeley with me. Now, when I was in Berkeley, an amazing thing happened to me. One summer, my sister had become the personal secretary to Mary Pickford, who was a very famous silent film star. And so I was asked to come down to stuff envelopes and just generally help. And it was just so wonderful because I met Douglas Fairbank, who was married to her at that point, and I got to see Pickfair, their very famous place where they lived in Hollywood. Now, by the end of college, I had become engaged to Tom. And it was decided between a couple of my friends who were also engaged to go to Europe on the grand tour. And my friends had their two mothers accompany us. And once we got to Europe, we really did see so much, so many wonderful things. But the main thrust was to go to Paris to have our trousseaux made, especially for us. And so that was a very exciting thing, but there was even something more exciting because Charles Lindbergh was going to be landing his plane at Orly Airport while we were there. And so, instead of going to the airport that day that he did land, I just knew it was going to be just a terrible traffic jam and just fraught with danger. So instead, we got up very early the next day and we went to the Champs-Élysées and got a perfect place right on the curb. And so when the parade began, Charles Lindbergh went right by us very closely. I swear we caught his eye because afterwards we said to each other, he was really smiling to all of us. And that's how we felt. Now, when we got finished, I do want to mention that in our collection here, I have my wedding dress. And it's been on display a few times, and it's just a beautifully made dress. So, when we got on our way, we were going to finish up in the British Isles, but I received some very sad news. Tom's father had died. And so the big elaborate wedding we were planning had to be changed. And so Tom and I got married in a small chapel in Berkeley, and then we had a nice reception, but not very big, in my parents' house. So, once we were married, it was time to go to our new home. And so the Porter family's roots were in this area, and so it was decided that we would move to Watsonville. It was just grand coming here. I had visited here when I was younger with some of my girlfriends. But anyway, as soon as we got here, all the Porter relatives were saying, where will the couple live? What's going to happen? So Gammy Porter said, well, why don't you come and live on my property? And Tom said, oh no. And then Tom's mother said, well, why don't you come in town and live with me? And I said, oh no. And I'll tell you why. One of the main reasons was Tom had given me a beautiful black horse for an engagement present, and he had had a wonderful saddle made especially for me for a wedding present. And my mind was set, I need to be in the country. So we started looking around, and we found a porterhouse that was in the Hall District, falling apart, in bad repair. It even had fleas. But I could see the possibilities, and I fell in love with that property and that house. And so it was repaired, and soon Tom and I moved in. But I did live with Tom's mother while it was being repaired, and I got to wear some of my wonderful trousseau clothes. And since they lived very formally, it came in handy. Well, once we got to our new house, we didn't have very much furniture. I didn't have a car yet, but all our friends loved to dance, so we would invite everybody out. Since there wasn't very much furniture in the living room anyway, we would just throw open the doors and windows and dance. It was a great time. Since I didn't have a car, I needed to get my supplies once a week, and so one of my friends would come out, and we could get everything we needed right around the plaza. There was the library, there was the bank, there was John's shoe store was even across the street, Woolworths, Ford's department store. And so all the supplies could be gotten in that one little trip. And so, once I got involved, I invited a curator from Monterey to teach us how to preserve the clothes and buy archival tissue paper and archival boxes and how to take care of them. And I've told my daughter Diane many times, I am so proud of the people that continue on with the clothing collection and how they take care of it and how they display the clothes. And now that I think about it, I was going to tell you another nickname of mine, and it was Beezy, but I'll save that for another day. I'm expecting Zoe Ann Orr, because she had decided to join me today. Here she is. Here she is now.
Here I am. God, I love a party. Isn't it fabulous? Everybody's here. We're really thrilled. Did you know that my husband, Frank Orr, he was gifted this property by his aunt. Isn't that wonderful? And I, in turn, gifted it to the Paro Valley Historical Association. I had no children, and this house was very important to me. And this group has really gone out of its way to make this a fabulous place to have a party, a wedding reception, and for a few old ladies to come down and hang out. We have a lot of fun here. And did you notice that we have a plaque here? It says we're on the National Register of Historic Places. This is in Watsonville. We got on the National Register. Do we have any other places here that are on the National Register?
The plaza.
The Plaza. Oh yeah, yeah, remember that plaza?
The old Watsonville Hospital.
Yeah, that doesn't count. That's way too new. Anyway, also, I have to check here because, I'm really old and I get confused. And I had another husband, Jerry Marcus, and he was very, very instrumental in Paro Valley Historical Association. And today his daughter Mary, who was very close to me in the old days, and I would like Mary to lift her hand up and just give a little wave. And maybe we can, if anyone else knew me, I would appreciate it if you could come up and just say, hey, do you remember this or that? Because, times are getting tough. Also, taking a wider view of the property, in addition to the carriage house and the tank house and the garage that were here when Frank and I were in residence, there is a building that was brought in during the PVH presidency of Ray Hoffman. And I'm sure I see Diane nodding. Oh yeah, Ray. Ray was he did a lot of wonderful things here. He really, really did. And we have this building, and I'm going to bring in John Mello, and he's going to tell you about the building.
Well, yes, I know that Ray was instrumental in restoring our water tower, which many people thought should be either demolished or, it wasn't worth saving, but because it was historic fabric, he completely restored the whole thing from top to bottom. It's not ADA accessible, meaning it's not wheelchair accessible, so we don't take people up in it. But it's such a priceless remnant of the Bacchus era that we can't possibly not maintain it. And at some point we'll be able to use it as an exhibit space, but right now you can't really go up to the tower, even though it sounds like a lot of fun. I took some people up there the other day and I said, don't tell anybody I took you up here. But they were Bacchus, family members from Germantown, Pennsylvania, who just showed up here one day and said, oh, we've looked you up on the internet. And I thought, well, it'd be nice if you would call ahead, but they didn't, and that's okay. But she had done all the genealogy back to the Middle Ages of the Bacchus family and all of everything. And so I took her and her grandson up to the top of the water tower. And I said, now don't you fall down. But anyway, that was fun. So he also renovated the carriage house and made it into an exhibit space, which is a very important part of the historic fabric here. And then also brought in the double-wide mobile home over there, which became our it was our archive before we built the new archive. And then that's now our textile storage facility. So there was a whole mindset that Ray had about doing great things that I'm trying to fill his shoes. It's like I can never do all the things Ray did here. I wish I could, but I think we've run out of land. We're going to have to buy some more land over here. And I don't know if you know it or not, but Watsonville High School has pigs behind this fence back here. They have animals back here. So it's still a farm in a certain sense, which is really amazing. So I would like to call the historic figures out for a bow, if you don't mind. Judge? Mabel? Bernice? And Zoe? Yes. Okay. Thank you so much. Now, you have to remember, this is living history in more than one sense. Not only are they portraying historic figures, but each one of them have their own deep roots in the Pajaro Valley that qualify them as unique figures in their own right. It isn't just an impersonation going on here. All of them are very notable. Thank you.